What's going on, everybody? This Afro think tank. For all my historical and political observers, have you noticed how white supremacy is the number one enemy of white supremacy? Hmm? Have you noticed? If you just step out the way and let white supremacy do what white supremacy gonna do, it guarantees destruction for white supremacy. It does. Because to be a white supremacist, you have to be fanatical, you have to be arrogant, you have to be delusional. And if you operate in the real world with a high level of delusion on top of arrogance, you're bound to make decisions that are detrimental to your survival, right? And currently we're seeing that. You see, there are white people, all right? Now, I'm not talking about my light-skinned folk, all right? Y'all know who I'm talking about. I'm talking about my light-skinned folk. All right, I'm talking about white people, all right? I'm talking about people who really like dive into this white is might is right type of thing, right? Not my Europeans who know who they are, all right? Not my Europeans who know they just a branch off that African tree. I ain't talking about y'all, all right? Y'all already know. Y'all the most humble group of Europeans, all right? I'm talking about white people, right? These white people who really think that because they are white, that when they invent a weapon, that they're the only ones who can invent that weapon. That when they come up with strategies, that they're the only ones who can come up with a strategy. That they are automatically going to be superior in every aspect of human interaction. And every single time they find out that that is not the case. Every time, right? And listen, African Americans, right? We fought against the worst savage barbarians on the planet for the longest amount of time anybody else has ever fought them, all right? All by ourselves. As a small clandestine group of Africans stripped from Africa, all the way over here with nowhere to run. We couldn't run. We had to stay here, right? Every time we meet them on the battlefield, we show them that their superiority is a delusion. Yet, somehow, within their communities, they have managed to convince themselves that they are so superior that they are invincible and can't be defeated and can't be diluted, right? We've gotten to the point where white supremacy and all its institutions have made it so white supremacy is dying. White supremacy is on the back foot, right? The institutions they have created is being taken over by the people they chose to marginalize in order to uplift themselves. And I've always wondered, if they were so superior, why is it that they needed everybody else to do their work for them? Why couldn't that superior white man bring a bunch of superior white people from Europe and get out there and pick cotton in a superior way? Huh? How come those superior white men didn't go get the superior stock of white men, right, to go into the Midwest to go defeat those supposed savage Native Americans? Why did they have to go get Africans to do it? Huh? How come these superior white men, right, couldn't go and develop and build all the structures that we have here, well, there in America, huh? Why couldn't these superior white men use their superior minds to develop the technologies that allow us all to communicate with each other and see each other magically somehow on these telecommunicational devices? Huh? Why is it that for a group of people that are so superior, they have to outsource all the superior stuff, right? So what happens is at some point, white supremacy woke up and realized that they are no longer the doctors, the nurses, not the police chiefs or the judges in all the major metropolitan areas that were built up because of the money funneling from all their supposed superior ancestors who gathered all that together. They're waking up to find out that all the countries that they have bombed and subjugated are using the lessons they've learned from those horrible days to improve themselves militarily and economically and have strategies to defeat a seemingly overwhelming military dominant force. I mean, history will tell you that the delusion of white supremacy says that they can go any place because of this gun and cannon and these superior weapons and defeat an entire country just simply off the basis of their decision to just kill. Because we know white supremacy, their answer to everything is to kill. That's the answer. Kill. There's no intellectual movement happening in that head. At the end of the day, the savage, barbarian Neanderthal only knows how to do one thing. Kill. Hell, even America's greatest weapons are invented by foreigners. Think about it. America's greatest weapons were developed and built by foreigners. And then those superior individuals took charge of it, put their name on it, and said they did it. Right? So I'm just saying, this black woman, she's going to break it down even further than me. And she read them good. She read them good. And keep in mind, I ain't talking about the light-skinned ones. All right? You fine Europeans out there who know better, right? But unfortunately, you guys are guilty by association because you look just like them white folk. All right? Y'all got an internal battle that I see that you guys are fighting right now against your brethren, right? For the hearts and minds and the culture that you guys want to have in the future. Right? I see y'all doing it, right? It's got to be rough. It's got to be rough to be a light-skinned human being, right? And have to deal with all these damn white folk making y'all look bad all the time with their ignorant mindsets that says that they are supreme. If you have to tell yourself that you are supreme, you ain't supreme, all right? If you got to cut the nuts off and the balls off another man because you intimidated by his nuts and balls, then that means your nuts and balls are not supreme, all right? If you have to subjugate a whole group of people simply because you are afraid of them, then you are not supreme. If you need a gun because you can't fight, that means you ain't supreme. Because only cowards need guns against people who ain't got one. Right? You're only tough if that person got a gun like you. All right? If you want to fight from a distance, they should be able to fight from a distance. See, that's fair. But if they standing over there like a warrior and you got to stand way back here because you scared and you got your little gun and you got to shoot over there because you don't want that superior being to get close to you because you know, in fact, that you are not superior. But you got to keep telling yourself that, right? So I'm just saying. Anyway, without further ado, let's listen to this black chick read them. She's gonna read them good, all right? Y'all tell me what y'all think in the comment section. Anyway, that's all I got to say. This Afro Think Tank. Learn some, teach some. I'm out.
White people, white supremacists in particular, are going to white supreme themselves into extinction. And it's a canon event. None of us should even think about interfering. And it's so funny to watch, not funny haha, but funny situationally, because they routinely underestimate non-white people and non-white nations, which is exactly what we're seeing in Iran right now. The thing is, when you're racist, you can't operate in racism and logic at the same time. You have to choose one or the other. So if you choose to operate under this delusion that white people are the only ones with motion, that America isn't real and the European nations are the only ones with motion, you're going to chronically and fatally underestimate your brown and black opponents. And that's exactly what's happening right now. This type of arrogance, the type of arrogance that led BBNet and that dumpster fire in the White House to attack Iran with no just cause is the same. It's this type of arrogance that is born out of white imperialism. And white imperialism, said another way, is just European bullying. And they have just been bullying people for so long with just, unmatched levels of violence and barbarism that they've deluded themselves into thinking is strength, that now they've gotten high on their own supply and they legitimately feel like they're the smartest and the strongest and the most strategic in the room when they couldn't be further from the truth. But you never interrupt your opponent when they're making a mistake. So I'm going to sit back and watch as they flatten isn't real. And I just hope that when it comes time for America to pay her just due, people know where to direct their anger, because it wasn't us. And you already know what I mean by us. But this white imperialism, this European imperialism, that insatiable greed that these people have for other people's shit, has been the cause of most of the wars throughout history. It was definitely the cause of World War I and World War II. Right now, we're talking about World War I in chapter 14 of A People's History of the United States, titled War is the Health of the State. And do you know who called out the whiteness of it all when it first started? W.E.B. Du Bois. W.E.B. Du Bois. Oh my God, I wish I could have met him. If they asked me who I could sit and have lunch with, dead or alive, if I had to pick 5 people, W.E.B. Du Bois would be one of those people. The second person would be that John Curacao CIA guy. I would love to have lunch with him. But W.E.B. Du Bois pointed out in 1915 in an article that he wrote for Atlantic Monthly the real reason behind the First World War. And I'll give you a hint. The real reason was white people wanting shit that's not theirs. Again. That's all they ever do. And so, in order to set the scene for where this world war came from, I'm just going to read you directly from the book. And what I want is for you to think about how this connects to what we see in 2026. Because keep in mind, if you're thinking to yourself, well, how is this Iranian conflict in any way similar to imperialism? Like, how does imperialism play into this at all? Girl, isn't real wants everything. They want to basically decimate the entire Muslim world so they can turn it into a Jewish state. If that's not imperialism, I don't know what is. But I shouldn't say Jewish. I should say Zionist, right? A Zionist state. No shade to the Jews. So let's get into what role imperialism played in World War One. Now, before I read all of this, and by all of this, it's like less than a page. Before I read all of this, I want to point out 3 themes to keep in mind as I read through this. The first theme is imperialism, because all of these white nations are fighting over like control of black and brown nations. So it's like a vampire fight. Which one of us is going to get to suck the blood from this African country? So it's imperialism. The second thing that he's pointing out is American hypocrisy. And the third thing that he's pointing out is the ingenious evil of capitalism in uniting exploiter, rich minority, and exploited, white poors, in a common goal of dominating the blacks and the browns. All right, let's get into it. Howard Zinn writes, a remarkably perceptive article on the nature of the First World War appeared in May 1915 in the Atlantic Monthly. Written by W.E.B. Du Bois, it was titled The African Roots of War. It was a war for empire, of which the struggle between Germany and the Allies over Africa was both symbol and reality. Quote from Du Bois, in a very real sense, Africa is a prime cause of this terrible overturning of civilization which we have lived to see, end quote. Africa, Du Bois said, is the land of the 20th century because of the gold and diamonds of South Africa, the cocoa of Angola and Nigeria, the rubber and ivory of the Congo, the palm oil of the West Coast. Du Bois saw more than that. He was writing several years before Lenin's Imperialism, which noted the new possibility of giving the working class of the imperial country a share of the loot. The loot, because these motherfuckers were stealing. He pointed to the paradox of greater democracy in America alongside increased aristocracy and hatred toward darker races. He explained the paradox by the fact that the white working man has been asked to share the spoil of exploiting, quote, chinks and niggers. Yes, the average citizen of England, France, Germany, the United States had a higher standard of living than before. But, to quote Du Bois, whence comes this new wealth? Meaning, where is this new wealth coming from? It comes primarily from the darker nations of the world, Asia and Africa, South and Central America, the West Indies, and the islands of the South Seas. Du Bois saw the ingenuity of capitalism in uniting exploiter, rich minority, and exploited, poor whites, creating a safety valve for explosive class conflict. It is no, quote, it is no longer simply the merchant quote, it is no longer simply the merchant prince or the aristocratic monopoly or even the employing class that is exploiting the world. It is the nation, a new democratic nation composed of united capital and labor. The United States fitted that idea of Du Bois. American capitalism needed international rivalry and periodic war to create an artificial community of interest between rich and poor, supplanting the genuine community of interest among the poor that showed itself in sporadic movements. So let's just annotate this part of the book real quick. Zinn writes that it was a war for empire, of which the struggle between Germany and the Allies over Africa was both symbol and reality. What else is a struggle for empire in modern day? I'll give you a second. Okay. What are the Zionists trying to do right now? Create an empire. How are they trying to create this empire? By going into darker nations and taking over what they already have and then calling it theirs. This is what colonizers do. This is what it looks like when history starts to repeat itself. Same shit, different day. Same motivations, different faces. Same story, different country. And so if at the beginning of the 20th century, they were all trying to walk down on Africa so that they could get the gold and diamonds of South Africa, the cocoa of Angola and Nigeria, the rubber and ivory of the Congo, the palm oil of the West Coast, what exactly are they trying to get from Iran right now? Oil. What exactly have they been trying to get from the Palestinians this entire time, this entire 80 years? Land. When I tell you these motherfucking European colonizers never change tactics, and that's their problem. Because since they never change tactics, they've become what? Predictable. And what happens when your enemy is both predictable and extremely arrogant? They lose. And then when Howard Zinn says that Du Bois was pointing to the paradox of greater democracy in America alongside increased aristocracy and hatred toward darker races, what this entire Make America Great Again shtick that these crazy ass white people have been on for 10 years has been operating under the delusion that we're improving our democracy alongside increased aristocracy. The rich have just gotten richer, and hatred toward darker races. Racism has just gotten more blatant in this country. And then Du Bois goes on to say that he explained the paradox by the fact that the white working man has been asked to share the spoil of exploiting chinks and niggers. Excuse the slurs. This is literally what is written in this book. Okay. How does that relate? How does that mirror what's going on right now? Just use your brain and think. I'm not going to think for you. Okay. I want to point out how incredibly courageous it is that Du Bois, a black man, had the courage, had the fucking balls on him to call out the hypocrisy of white supremacy in 1915. People struggle to do that today because you're all a bunch of bitches. Not you all, but you know who I mean. You know who I'm talking about. But Du Bois was talking his shit 111 years ago when it was much harder to do so. I just wanted to give him his flowers there. But he goes on to say, Howard Zinn goes on to write of Du Bois, the average citizen of England, France, Germany, and the United States had a higher standard of living than they did before. Sure. How did they achieve this higher standard of living? Let's pull at that thread a little bit more. Where did all of this wealth come from? When you go to Paris, when you go to Portugal, when you go to London, and you look around and you see all of these gorgeous buildings, where did they get the money to build these buildings? Where is all of this money coming from to build this? But then when you go to the places where they're sourcing this wealth from, Swedish chocolate is not grown in Sweden. I'll give you one guess where it's grown, and everybody there looks like me. But the people there that actually are producing the chocolate don't have any motherfucking money. Why? Because Sweden is taking all of the money. He's pointing out these hypocrisies of imperialism. And he's also pointing out when he says, when Howard Zinn writes, Du Bois saw the ingenuity of capitalism in uniting exploiter and exploited, creating a safety valve for explosive class conflict. What he's saying is these rich white minorities that are at the very top of the capitalist pyramid know that they can always count on poor white people to unite in their drive and in their promotion of capitalism and use those poor white people against everybody else by giving those poor white people a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of the profit that comes from exploiting black and brown people. And this is how capital, the rich minority, and labor, the poor whites, become united under American capitalism. And it's crazy. And so Du Bois is saying it is no longer simply the merchant prince. It is no longer simply the aristocratic monopoly like what we see in Bridgerton. It is no longer simply the employing class. It's no longer even like the landlords and the managers and like the mill owners who are exploiting the working people. The further we get into the 20th century, you're going to see that capitalism becomes a lot more complicated. And this is why I love the show The Good Place, because it really highlights how all of these different systems that that impact modern life, they make morality so complicated that none of us are fully innocent in it. I'm a black woman, a double minority, and I'm not even fully innocent from what America has done to these other nations because I benefit from the capital that comes from exploiting these black and brown countries. And so you think like that's such a mind fuck, especially when you're black or brown yourself, but you're also an American. So you're not quite as disadvantaged as a black or brown person in Brazil or a black and brown person in Ghana. I don't know these countries like that. If I'm insulting Brazil and Ghana, let me know and tell me to shut the fuck up. I'm just throwing shit out there. I'm just trying to find black and brown countries. Don't come for me. But Congo, that's a better one. I feel like Congo's really oppressed right now. So that's a better one. But anyway, and then lastly, Howard Zinn writes, the United States fits this idea of united labor and capital because American capitalism needs international rivalry and periodic war to create an artificial community of interest between rich and poor. I want to pull at that a little bit. Okay. I have been talking about this for at least the past like 3 chapters. And every time I talk about it, I still feel like I'm not getting through to people because the reason that American capitalism thrives on division is because the cure to capitalism is community. The cure to capitalism is everybody getting along and everybody uniting, which is why the American capitalist machine is constantly starting shit all over the world. Because if they can start shit, then they can sell people weapons and they make billions of dollars selling people weapons. And that's just on an international stage. If they can keep starting shit in a domestic way, for instance, between black people and white people, then they can continue to convince white people that their biggest op is black people and not, in fact, the rich minority that it actually is. And how do they benefit from this? They keep white people keeping the system going while they go out here and do some more fuck shit. White people are literally, like, particularly the poor white people, and nowadays, the middle-class white people are born and bred to be like guard dogs for the rich minority at the top of the capitalist pyramid, and they like it that way because as long as they have all of these guard dogs on the ground level stopping the rest of us from storming the Capitol, they can keep on going with their vampire ball of bullshit. And so all of these societal ingredients still exist today. This American hypocrisy, the complications of capitalism and how capitalism thrive on racism and the imperialism of white countries fighting over control of black and brown countries. Like all of these ingredients still exist today. And those are the similarities between what's happening now and the First World War. But the difference, and this is a really, really important difference, is that most people, unlike in 1915, are not falling for the bullshit anymore. And people falling for the bullshit is an extremely important point. And that's why they spent so much money and so much energy propagandizing people during the First World War. Propaganda doesn't work as well as it used to. And the reason for that is not only because of social media, but there's just a higher level of consciousness among the collective these days. So we don't fall for the same tactics. We're not at each other's throats. We can all look around and see exactly where all of this hostility is coming from. The majority of us can all look around and see exactly where this hostility is coming from. And that's a major wrench in their plans for a world war because you can't pull off a world war if the world doesn't want a war. Go to the next part.
Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such an extent that you bleach? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Before you come asking Mr. Muhammad, does he teach hate, you should ask yourself, who taught you to hate being what God gave you?
She can. Boycott diamonds and gold. Free Sudan. Boycott diamonds and gold. We most definitely cannot forget about the people of Sudan.